chosen one. This is not an accident. This moment found you because heaven scheduled it. Right now, in the unseen, something is shifting around your life. You are standing at the edge of a supernatural breakthrough, a divine release that has been gathering weight in the spirit. Anointed. 1. The financial doors that refuse to open are beginning to respond to your name. The wealth that was delayed is now being reassigned to your hands, for it is written, in due season you will reap if you do not faint. Take a breath. Align your spirit. Heaven is speaking, and this word is for you. Your journey has not been defined by rejection, but by strategic redirection. What you interpreted as isolation was not a punishment. It was a deliberate protective mechanism, shaping and preparing you in ways not immediately visible. In the moments when progress felt impossible and every door seemed closed, something deeper was taking place beneath the surface. The season that appeared stagnant was in reality one of profound internal growth. Instead of losing time, you were gaining strength. Instead of being overlooked, you were being refined and equipped for responsibilities you could not yet see. This sense of spiritual tension, the feeling that something was shifting around you, was not imagined. It was an intuitive response to an unseen alignment. Many experience such moments yet fail to recognize their significance. You, however, sensed that your circumstances carried a larger purpose. The heaviness, the quiet, and the unanswered questions served not to crush you, but to fortify the foundations of your character. Such experiences often precede major transitions because the conditions required for breakthrough are rarely comfortable. Personal experience confirms this pattern. Many individuals, including myself, have walked through periods where efforts seemed fruitless and prayers felt unheard. Yet every instance of silence eventually revealed itself as preparation. Doors that did not open spared us from environments that would have limited our growth. Relationships that dissolved prevented long-term damage. Opportunities that fell through redirected us toward paths better suited for our development. In these instances, the delay was not a sign of denial, but a method of orchestration. This process of refinement is essential. The version of oneself that initiates a prayer or intention is rarely the version capable of sustaining the fulfillment of that request. Growth occurs not only by achieving goals, but also by developing resilience, discernment, and emotional maturity. In your case, this development happened quietly. The tears shed in private, the battles fought without acknowledgement, and the perseverance demonstrated in times of uncertainty all contributed to strengthening your inner framework. Many abandon their goals in moments of uncertainty. The pressure becomes too great, the silence too unsettling, and the lack of visible progress too discouraging. Yet you continued. Your consistency in adversity, though unnoticed by others, did not go unnoticed by the processes shaping your future. What distinguishes individuals who receive breakthrough from those who do not is often persistence. Your endurance has built a type of authority and wisdom that cannot be acquired through shortcuts. It emerges only through lived experience and sustained commitment. This is why the challenges you encountered were not merely obstacles, but indicators of preparation. You now possess greater clarity, deeper intuition, and a more grounded sense of identity than you had in the past. These qualities did not exist in you to the same degree a year ago, or even a few months ago. Growth has occurred incrementally often without your conscious awareness, but the cumulative effect has equipped you for responsibilities previously beyond your capacity. Reflect on your experiences, the relationships that dissolved, the opportunities that disappeared, and the emotional or psychological battles you endured. These events were not random. They functioned as corrective mechanisms, guiding you toward environments, people and circumstances aligned with your long-term well-being. Each loss, each struggle and each delay contributed to a deeper level of internal refinement that now positions you for significant advancement. Your current sense of readiness is not coincidental. It reflects the completion of an internal process that occurred over time. You are approaching a period of accelerated change where consistency and preparedness converge with opportunity. Moments of breakthrough often follow periods of pressure, and the increased difficulty you experienced recently suggests that a major shift is approaching. Systems, whether biological, psychological, or spiritual, often exhibit increased resistance immediately before transformation. The tension you feel now signals proximity to change rather than distance from it. Your internal capacities, strength, clarity, emotional regulation, and discernment have matured to the point where you are capable of navigating environments that once would have overwhelmed you. In this sense, breakthrough is not merely something that happens to you, it is something you become prepared to sustain. Thus, the call to act is not based on urgency or fear, but on alignment. When internal readiness intersects with external timing, action becomes necessary. The moment you are in is the result of prolonged preparation. What lies ahead is not an ordinary shift, but a significant transition into greater stability, authority, and opportunity. The process has already begun within you, now it is unfolding around you. Periods of intense internal or external resistance often indicate that a system is approaching a threshold. This pattern appears across multiple domains of life. In physiology, muscles experience their greatest strain moments before they adapt and strengthen. In psychology, individuals frequently confront their deepest fears or uncertainties immediately before cognitive or emotional breakthroughs occur. In spiritual or personal development, the same principle applies. Heightened challenges are often precursors to transformation. The increased pressure you experienced in recent months aligns with this pattern. Rather than signaling failure or misalignment, it suggested that the structures of your life were rearranging themselves to accommodate a significant shift. What you perceived as opposition was frequently a reflection of your own expansion. When you outgrow an environment, relationships, or mindset, tension naturally emerges. Systems resist change, not because change is negative, but because stability, even when dysfunctional, feels safer than the unknown. Your life was not falling apart, it was recalibrating itself around a new level of awareness and capacity. The friction you encountered was the result of misalignment between your emerging identity and the remnants of previous versions of yourself. This internal restructuring is essential for sustainable growth. Without it, breakthrough would collapse under the weight of unprepared foundations. Consider the way infrastructure must be reinforced before supporting heavier loads. Buildings, bridges, and technological systems undergo stress testing to ensure structural integrity. Similarly, the experiences that challenged you were not indicators of weakness, but assessments of readiness. They revealed not how far you had to go, but how much strength you had already developed. These experiences also forced you to confront outdated patterns and beliefs. Some of your earlier assumptions about yourself, about others, and about what was possible were too limited to support the life you're now moving toward. The losses, disappointments, and unexpected changes you endured served to dismantle frameworks that would have hindered future progress. Though uncomfortable, this process created room for more accurate, expansive perspectives. Part of this refinement involved learning to distinguish between genuine opportunities and distractions. There were situations that appeared beneficial on the surface, but carried hidden costs. Certain people in your life may have seemed supportive, but were misaligned with your long-term well-being. Emotional ties, old habits, or familiar environments might have made it difficult to let go, even when they were no longer contributing to your growth. Yet the removal of these elements through endings, distance, or inner shifts was necessary to free you from constraints you did not fully recognize. This form of pruning is not punitive. It is selective optimization. Systems strengthen when unnecessary elements are removed. Focus increases. Energy becomes more efficiently directed. Progress accelerates. Your life underwent this kind of optimization even when the process felt disorienting. What remained after the pruning were the qualities, relationships, and commitments aligned with your purpose and potential. It is important to acknowledge the emotional demands of such periods. Even when change is beneficial, uncertainty can feel destabilizing. However, your ability to remain anchored through these fluctuations demonstrates a level of emotional intelligence and resilience that many never fully develop. You navigated ambiguity with persistence rather than retreat. You made choices rooted in long-term vision rather than short-term comfort. You continued searching for meaning even when circumstances provided none. These behaviors reflect a maturity that becomes critical in seasons of accelerated opportunity. The emerging clarity you now feel, whether subtle or pronounced, is evidence that the internal restructuring has settled into a new equilibrium. Patterns that once confused you now make sense. Emotions that once overwhelmed you have become manageable. Decisions that once felt impossible now appear straightforward. This shift signals readiness. It indicates that your internal state has caught up to the external possibilities forming around you. Key indicators of this readiness include an increased capacity to evaluate situations objectively, a reduced dependence on external validation, and a growing ability to move through challenges without losing coherence. You may also notice a heightened sense of direction or purpose. These shifts represent the culmination of your previous season and serve as the launch point for the next. From this position, action becomes not only possible but necessary. When potential aligns with preparedness, opportunities begin to open in rapid succession. The momentum you feel is not imagined. It is the natural consequence of internal and external alignment. What once required force now begins to unfold with less resistance. Decisions feel clearer. Relationships become more authentic. Circumstances start to rearrange in ways that support your growth rather than hinder it. You are entering a period in which the pace of change may increase dramatically. This acceleration is not chaotic. It is synchronized with the developments that have taken place within you. Your ability to respond effectively will depend not on effort but on awareness. When aligned with a larger pattern, progress becomes more intuitive, and the steps ahead reveal themselves with increasing clarity. The transition into this new stage of your life is not a coincidence, but the predictable result of sustained inner development. Breakthrough in any domain rarely appears sudden when examined closely. What looks instantaneous from the outside is usually the culmination of many invisible shifts, mental, emotional, behavioral, and environmental, that have been unfolding over time. Your situation is no exception. You did not simply arrive here, you evolved here. Every internal adjustment, every moment of discipline, every decision to continue, despite uncertainty, contributed to the momentum you now feel building around you. Momentum itself is an important indicator. In physics, an object in motion tends to remain in motion unless acted upon by an opposing force. The same is true in human development. Once you begin making choices aligned with your long-term goals rather than your temporary emotions, you create a sustained forward motion. This momentum carries you even through periods of doubt or fatigue. You may have sensed this shift recently, the feeling that even on difficult days, something in you refuses to return to old patterns. That resistance to regression is evidence of progress. It shows that growth has become your default rather than your exception. This internal momentum is now intersecting with external alignment. Opportunities that once felt distant may begin appearing unexpectedly. Conversations that seemed impossible may open effortlessly. Pathways that were previously blocked may begin clearing without your direct intervention. These developments are not random. They reflect a synchronization between who you have become internally and what your environment can now support. When identity and environment align, forward movement becomes almost inevitable. However, entering this stage requires a shift in how you interpret change. In earlier seasons, you may have viewed unexpected developments with caution or skepticism. Now, because of your expanded capacity, you can meet change with curiosity rather than fear. The same event that once destabilized you can now serve as a signal guiding your next decisions. Emotional reactivity gives way to informed discernment. You begin distinguishing between impulses that arise from anxiety and intuitions that arise from clarity. This distinction is critical as new responsibilities and opportunities emerge. Breakthrough is not merely a reward, it is a transition into a new level of stewardship. Increased influence, improved relationships, elevated roles, or greater financial resources require corresponding levels of self-awareness and discipline. Without the internal structures you have developed, these opportunities could become overwhelming. But because you have undergone sustained refinement, you are now capable of managing what would have previously felt unmanageable. Another important aspect of this phase is the recalibration of your relational landscape. As you grow, your relationships inevitably shift. Some connections strengthen because they resonate with your new level of clarity, while others fade as they no longer support your development. This process is neither personal nor punitive. It is structural. Systems reorganize themselves to maintain equilibrium. You are part of a larger relational system that must adjust to accommodate your transformation. Recognizing this allows you to navigate relational changes without unnecessary guilt or resistance. You may also notice that certain conversations or interactions feel different. Topics you once entertained no longer interest you. Dynamics that once drained you now feel intolerable. People who once occupied central roles in your life may feel more distant, not because something went wrong, but because your priorities and values have shifted. This natural distancing is often a precursor to meaningful new connections. As your internal world expands, your external world must adjust to reflect it. This phenomenon mirrors principles observed in ecological and social systems. When an ecosystem undergoes a change in climate or resources, its inhabitants either adapt, migrate, or diminish. Similarly, when your internal environment shifts, when your emotional, psychological, or spiritual climate changes, the relationships surrounding you reorganize. Those who align with your growth adapt with you. Those who do not naturally create distance. In both cases, the system seeks balance. This reorganization may feel disorienting at first, but it lays the groundwork for what comes next. Your emerging clarity creates space for new alliances, new mentors, new opportunities, and new resources that match your current trajectory. This is why holding on to outdated relationships or environments can hinder progress. They anchor you to previous versions of yourself, making it harder to move freely into what is now unfolding. In this new stage, your primary task is not to force outcomes, but to remain attentive. Awareness becomes your strategy. Instead of pushing for results, you observe patterns, respond to shifts, and adjust with intention. You allow your internal wisdom sharpened through past challenges to inform your decisions. This approach reduces resistance and increases the likelihood of sustainable success. What awaits you next is not merely improvement, but transformation, a categorical shift rather than a linear progression. The systems of your life are preparing to reorganize around a new level of possibility. This transition will require presence, clarity, and courage, but you have already demonstrated the capacity for all three. As you progress into this emerging phase, you may notice a subtle but significant change in how you interpret your own experiences. What once felt confusing now reveals patterns. What once seemed arbitrary begins to make sense. This shift in perception is not accidental. It reflects the integration of insights gained from past challenges, emotional growth, and expanded self-awareness. When these elements converge, they produce a form of internal coherence that becomes essential for navigating more complex opportunities. Internal coherence allows you to evaluate situations with greater clarity. Rather than reacting impulsively, you now have the capacity to pause, observe, and analyze before acting. This ability is not merely psychological maturity, it is the result of sustained exposure to uncertainty. Through previous difficulties, you developed resilience and adaptability. Now, these same qualities function as stabilizing forces, enabling you to engage your environment with confidence rather than defensiveness. The same circumstances that once overwhelmed you no longer hold the same emotional power. This transformation also enhances your capacity to recognize alignment. Opportunities may arise that match not only your goals, but also your values and sense of purpose. In the past, you might have accepted situations that were misaligned simply because they were available. Now you are better equipped to distinguish between what is suitable and what is sustainable. This discernment is a core component of breakthrough. It ensures that progress is not merely fast, but meaningful. Part of this increased discernment includes recognizing the difference between movement and noise. Not every change indicates progress, and not every opportunity warrants pursuit. As you continue evolving, you may find that certain invitations or circumstances appear promising, yet lack the depth or alignment necessary for long-term growth. The emotional maturity you have cultivated allows you to decline what does not support your trajectory without feeling deprived or anxious. This restraint is not a limitation, but a sign of expanded freedom. Yet even with these new capacities, transitioning into a new stage often requires confronting the final remnants of old patterns. These remnants may appear as subtle doubts, lingering insecurities, or assumptions inherited from earlier experiences. They function like echoes, faint reminders of past versions of yourself that no longer define your identity. Recognizing these echoes without attaching to them is essential. They surface not because you are regressing, but because the mind revisits familiar pathways, even as you move into unfamiliar territory. This phase also challenges your understanding of identity. When you grow, your internal self-concept must adjust to reflect who you have become. If your self-perception remains tied to outdated narratives, you may inadvertently limit your progress. Growth requires not only behavioral change, but also perceptual change. You must recognize not only what you are capable of, but also who you have become through the process of refinement. This recognition is necessary to step into new roles and responsibilities with confidence. In many ways, this stage parallels the concept of cognitive reorganization. As your internal models of the world evolve, your behaviors, expectations, and interactions shift accordingly. This reorganization affects every dimension of your life. What you tolerate changes. What you pursue shifts. What once felt impossible may now feel accessible. This expanded sense of possibility invites you to operate with greater intentionality and to embrace opportunities that previously felt beyond reach. The environment around you will also begin to respond to this internal shift. People may treat you differently, not because they consciously choose to, but because your presence has changed. When internal stability increases, external interactions often become smoother. You communicate with greater clarity, you set boundaries with less hesitation, you express your needs without fear of rejection. These patterns create healthier dynamics, whether in personal relationships, professional settings, or larger social circles. This improved relational clarity can also illuminate areas that require separation or closure. As you become more aligned with your values, relationships that were sustained through habit rather than authenticity may naturally dissolve. Though such endings can be uncomfortable, they create space for connections that reflect who you are becoming. These transitions support long-term emotional and psychological health, even when accompanied by temporary discomfort. Financial, professional, or creative opportunities may also emerge. These avenues often appear once you achieve internal alignment, because your actions become more focused and your decision-making more efficient. Opportunities that previously eluded you may become accessible simply because you now possess the insight to recognize and pursue them appropriately. This shift is not a matter of luck, but of readiness. All these elements, clarity, discernment, relational restructuring, and emerging opportunities, indicate that you are entering a phase where significant acceleration is possible. Acceleration, however, does not imply chaos. It reflects the synchronization of your internal transformation with external circumstances. When these elements coalesce, progress unfolds with less resistance, and pathways that once seemed inaccessible begin to open with striking clarity. As you continue into this transformative phase, a deeper psychological and emotional shift begins to take shape, a shift that often goes unnoticed until its effects accumulate. You may find yourself responding to life with a steadiness that surprises even you. Situations that once triggered anxiety, perfectionism, or self-doubt now evoke a more measured reaction. This is not indifference, it is the result of expanded capacity. You are no longer operating from instinctual survival patterns. You are operating from a grounded sense of identity shaped by everything you have endured. One of the clearest signs of this maturation is the way you now interpret challenges. In earlier seasons, difficulty automatically translated to discouragement. Delay felt like denial. Silence felt like abandonment. But as your internal framework has strengthened, your interpretation has shifted. You've learned to see resistance not as an obstacle, but as data. You evaluate situations more objectively, extracting insight rather than internalizing shame. You have become skilled at learning from your experiences rather than collapsing under them. This shift in perception matters because it fundamentally changes your relationship to uncertainty. Uncertainty used to feel threatening. Now it feels like information waiting to be understood. You are developing the ability to navigate ambiguity without losing your center, an advanced psychological skill that often emerges only after prolonged periods of emotional turbulence. Whereas earlier versions of yourself may have equated uncertainty with danger, your current self recognizes that uncertainty often accompanies growth. This new relationship with uncertainty also allows you to make decisions with greater confidence. Decisions that once felt paralyzing now feel manageable because your internal state is no longer tethered to external validation. When you free yourself from the need for constant reassurance, you create space for authentic decision-making. This independence is the hallmark of someone who has integrated their experiences into a coherent whole. Another key aspect of your transformation involves your emotional boundaries. Through your previous challenges, you learned that overextending yourself emotionally, mentally, or financially was unsustainable. You began to recognize patterns of self-sacrifice that drained you and prevented you from using your energy effectively. Now, you can sense when something is misaligned because your internal signals have become sharper. Your intuition, once clouded by emotional strain, is clearer. You can detect subtle shifts in tone, intention, or energy that previously went unnoticed. As a result, your standards have risen not from arrogance, but from clarity. You are no longer willing to accept relationships or circumstances that undermine your well-being. This elevation of standards naturally reorganizes your environment. People who value reciprocity and emotional honesty remain. Those who rely on yourself, neglect to sustain the connection, drift away. This restructuring is not a failure, it is the natural consequence of growth. In the professional or creative realm, this shift manifests as increased focus. You no longer chase every possibility. Instead, you evaluate opportunities through a lens of sustainability and alignment. You understand that progress requires not just effort, but direction. As your priorities clarify, your output becomes more intentional. You invest time and energy into pursuits that reflect your deeper values rather than temporary impulses or external pressures. Creatively or intellectually, you may notice an increase in insight. Ideas come more easily. Solutions emerge with less effort. This is not accidental. When the mind becomes less burdened by unresolved conflicts or emotional clutter, its capacity for innovation increases. You are entering a phase where your cognitive and emotional resources are more fully available to you, and this expanded resource availability contributes directly to enhanced performance. Financially, you may begin to notice opportunities that require both responsibility and courage. These opportunities may not present themselves as dramatic windfalls. Rather, they might appear in the form of strategic decisions, partnerships, or shifts in mindset that support long-term stability. As you adopt healthier beliefs about money worth and capacity, you open pathways that previously felt inaccessible. Your relationship with resources becomes more balanced and less reactive, enabling thoughtful long-term decision-making instead of fear-driven choices. All of these shifts, emotionally, relationally, intellectually, and financially, indicate that you are not simply improving, you are transitioning into a fundamentally different operational mode. You are becoming someone who does not merely withstand pressure, but who can make meaningful strategic decisions in the midst of it. This ability will become increasingly important as the opportunities ahead of you expand in scale and complexity. In essence, you are not preparing for a minor improvement, but for a structural transformation. The systems of your life, your habits, relationships, internal beliefs, and external behaviors are aligning around a new level of possibility. This alignment is the foundation of sustainable breakthrough. Without it, progress would be temporary. With it, progress becomes inevitable. As this internal restructuring solidifies, you begin to perceive yourself differently. Identity is not static. It evolves in response to experience, insight, and emotional maturation. For much of your earlier journey, you may have carried an outdated self-concept that no longer reflected the person you were becoming. You might have underestimated your abilities, downplayed your resilience, or framed your past through a lens that limited what you believed was possible. Now, however, something more grounded and accurate is taking shape. You are beginning to see yourself with clearer eyes, not as someone defined by past failure or uncertainty, but as someone shaped by endurance, reflection, and growth. This emerging identity is not built on external achievements, it is built on internal coherence. You recognize that your past challenges were not indicators of inadequacy, but catalysts for evolution. This reinterpretation creates a healthier narrative, one that acknowledges the reality of what you went through, while also honoring the strength you demonstrated. Such a shift is psychologically significant because it alters how you interpret both your history and your future. Instead of viewing obstacles as evidence of limitation, you now perceive them as part of a developmental trajectory. With this new identity comes a refined understanding of responsibility. Previously, responsibility may have felt like an overwhelming burden, an expectation to carry more than you had the capacity for. Now, responsibility takes on a different meaning. It becomes an expression of capability rather than obligation. You no longer operate from a place of emotional overextension, but from intentional engagement. You understand where you can contribute meaningfully and where you must withdraw for your own well-being. This strategic approach to responsibility reflects a deeper trust in your own judgment. This trust also affects how you respond to external expectations. In earlier seasons, you may have made decisions to satisfy others, avoid conflict, or maintain harmony even at personal cost. As you grew, you realized that conformity often required self-abandonment. This realization has sharpened your boundaries. You can now differentiate between situations that require compromise and situations where compromise becomes self-betrayal. This clarity allows you to navigate relationships and obligations with a greater sense of agency. The growing sense of agency extends to your perspective on opportunity. Rather than waiting passively for circumstances to improve, you now recognize the power of deliberate action. You understand that progress is a collaboration between internal readiness and external alignment. When these two converge, action becomes effective. This recognition empowers you to move decisively, taking steps that reflect confidence rather than hesitation. You no longer rely on ideal timing or guaranteed outcomes. Instead, you rely on your strengthened intuition and accumulated experience. This willingness to act despite uncertainty represents a major psychological advancement. The fear of making mistakes once served as a barrier, keeping you trapped in cycles of overthinking and indecision. Now you recognize that mistakes are data points rather than disasters. Each decision, even imperfect ones, contributes to your understanding of yourself and your environment. This mindset frees you from paralysis and allows you to approach new challenges with curiosity rather than fear. You may also notice that your emotional landscape has stabilized. Moments that once triggered intense reactions now feel more manageable. This stability does not imply numbness. Rather, it reflects the integration of emotional experiences into a cohesive internal system. You are less likely to be destabilized by the unexpected because you have learned how to regulate your responses. This emotional regulation enhances your cognitive clarity, allowing you to think more critically and make more strategic decisions. As you embody these qualities, clarity, agency, discernment, regulation, your external circumstances begin adjusting accordingly. People respond differently to those who project steadiness. Opportunities become more visible to those who are prepared to recognize them. Life tends to open more possibilities to individuals who demonstrate consistency, maturity, and intentionality. Your recent journey has cultivated these traits within you, and you're beginning to witness the effects. This stage also involves a deeper awareness of timing. You may find yourself acting more intuitively, sensing when to move, when to wait, and when to let go. Timing, once a source of frustration, becomes a natural rhythm you attune to. This attunement reduces friction and increases flow, allowing your actions to align more closely with the unfolding patterns of your life. The more synchronized you become with this internal rhythm, the more your external experiences reflect coherence and ease. The cumulative effect of these developments is that you are transitioning into a new structural level of functioning. You are no longer surviving. You are operating with purpose. You're no longer reacting. You're responding with intention. You're no longer questioning your worth. You're embodying it. This shift marks the threshold of genuine transformation, one that prepares you not only to receive breakthrough, but to sustain it in the long term. As you stand on this threshold of transformation, another crucial shift begins to take shape. Your relationship to possibility expands. Possibility is not merely a concept, it is a psychological orientation. In earlier seasons, your sense of possibility may have been constrained by fear, by circumstance, or by a lack of supportive evidence. When life presents repeated obstacles, the mind naturally forms protective assumptions to avoid disappointment. You may have internalized beliefs such as things never work out for me, or opportunities like that aren't for people like me. These beliefs once made emotional sense, but they now conflict with the person you have become. With the internal restructuring you've undergone, these limiting assumptions no longer hold the same authority. You recognize that your previous perspectives were shaped by survival rather than truth. As your emotional system stabilizes and your cognitive clarity increases, your understanding of what is possible begins to widen. You start to recognize opportunities not as distant ideals, but as realistic extensions of your current trajectory. This expanded perception shifts the way you interpret challenges, risk, and reward. One of the defining markers of this stage is the emergence of long-term thinking. Instead of focusing solely on immediate relief or short-term comfort, you begin considering how decisions will affect your future stability and sense of purpose. You are more willing to endure temporary discomfort if it aligns with long-term growth. This shift reflects an advanced stage of psychological development where impulse-driven reactions give way to intentional strategy. You begin investing in yourself and your future with patience and confidence. This long-term perspective also influences how you assess your own abilities. Rather than questioning whether you are capable, you begin evaluating what steps are necessary to expand your capabilities further. Doubt becomes less personal and more informational. You use doubt as a signal, not a verdict. If something feels intimidating, you interpret it as an opportunity to grow rather than a reason to withdraw. This mindset reduces the emotional weight of challenge and increases your willingness to attempt what once felt impossible. Your capacity to navigate complexity increases as well. Previously, complex situations may have triggered overwhelm, leading to avoidance or indecision. Now complexity becomes something you can break down, analyze, and approach methodically. Your tolerance for ambiguity grows. You can make decisions even when outcomes are not guaranteed. This adaptability is a hallmark of individuals who thrive during major transitions. It allows you to remain steady in environments where others might become destabilized. As your inner world reorganizes, your external behaviors naturally shift. You may begin setting goals that previously felt out of reach. You may explore new pathways, creative, professional, relational, or financial, that align with your expanding sense of identity. You may also take calculated risks that reflect your increased self-trust. These behaviors are not random. They are the behavioral signatures of someone who has undergone deep internal change. Another significant development is the strengthening of your internal boundaries. As you grow, you become more attuned to the subtle signs of depletion, manipulation, or imbalance. You recognize earlier when a situation is consuming more energy than it provides. You sense more quickly when someone is projecting their insecurities onto you. You notice more clearly when environments are not conducive to your well-being. This heightened sensitivity enables you to navigate life with greater efficiency and less emotional leakage. You conserve energy for what truly matters. This sensitivity also brings a clearer understanding of your own needs. Throughout your earlier journey, you may have suppressed your needs to maintain peace, avoid rejection, or support others. Now, you acknowledge that your needs are valid and essential to your long-term health. This recognition marks a critical turning point. When individuals begin honoring their own needs without guilt or justification, they create the internal conditions necessary for authentic relationships, meaningful work, and sustainable success. As your relationship with yourself improves, your relationship with possibility becomes more grounded. You no longer fantasize about ideal futures while feeling powerless to create them. Instead, you identify clear steps and recognize your own agency in shaping outcomes. You operate from the understanding that breakthrough is not an event that happens randomly, but a convergence of preparation, opportunity, and decisiveness. You realize that you are both the architect and the beneficiary of the next chapter of your life. This awareness leads to a profound psychological state: readiness. Readiness is not excitement, nor is it impatience. It is calm. It is clarity. It is the absence of internal contradiction. When you feel ready, you no longer debate with yourself. You no longer seek excessive reassurance. You simply know. You recognize that you have become capable of handling what once intimidated you. This recognition quiets fear and amplifies focus. With readiness comes a natural forward movement. You begin taking actions that reflect your new identity. You initiate conversations that once felt daunting. You explore opportunities that once seemed out of reach. You make decisions with a newfound steadiness. These actions create momentum, and momentum carries you into environments that match your transformed internal state. This alignment between identity, possibility, and action is the gateway to the breakthrough you have been preparing for. It marks the point where internal development meets external opportunity. It is the moment when what once felt distant suddenly becomes accessible. As your internal and external worlds continue aligning, a new pattern begins to emerge. Your life starts responding to you differently. This is not imagination, nor is it a matter of coincidence. Human behavior, emotional frequency, cognitive clarity, and relational patterns all create measurable shifts in how environments, opportunities, and people interact with you. When your internal state changes, your external life gradually reorganizes to match it. Many individuals misinterpret this reorganization as instability, but in reality, it is the natural consequence of becoming a different version of yourself. One of the most noticeable shifts is the increased clarity with which you perceive your environment. You begin to notice subtleties. You once overlooked the tone behind someone's words, the energy of a room, the implications hidden beneath an opportunity, or the incompatibility woven into a familiar pattern. This heightened awareness is not anxiety, it is discernment, a refined ability to observe without collapsing into emotional reactivity. As your clarity sharpens, the world becomes easier to navigate because the signals you once missed become visible. This clarity influences how you make decisions. In the past, you may have hesitated, hoping for perfect circumstances before acting. You might have waited for reassurance guarantees or unanimous approval. Now you begin to understand that decisive action is rarely taken under perfect conditions. You recognize that clarity often emerges after the decision is made rather than before. This understanding allows you to move with a confidence that may appear sudden, but is actually rooted in deep internal alignment. Furthermore, your emotional resilience begins to function as a stabilizing force. Challenges still arise, but they do not destabilize you in the same way. Instead of spiraling into doubt, you pause, evaluate, and respond with intention. This shift signals that you are no longer operating from old emotional scripts. You are responding from a regulated, integrated sense of self, something that was built through the very challenges you once wished you could avoid. In relationships, this grounded presence becomes particularly visible. People may sense the change in you even before you verbalize it. Your boundaries become clearer. Your communication becomes more direct. You no longer tolerate dynamics that require self-erasure or emotional labor beyond your capacity. This does not create conflict. Rather, it clarifies relational roles. Those who can meet you at this new level strengthen their connection with you. Those who cannot naturally drift away. The shift feels less personal and more structural because it reflects the way systems adapt to change. As your relational landscape adjusts, new individuals may enter your life, people who resonate with your growth, who recognize your emerging strengths, and who reflect your evolving identity. These relationships often feel more fluid, more reciprocal, and more aligned with your values. They create environments where you can expand rather than contract. This type of relational alignment is essential because your next stage of growth will require connection, collaboration, or support systems that match your internal development. Your sense of purpose also becomes more defined. Purpose is not a sudden revelation. It is the gradual convergence of interests, abilities, experiences, and values. As the noise within you quiets, your intuitive understanding of what matters most becomes clearer. You begin to see patterns, what energizes you, what drains you, what aligns with your values, and what conflicts with them. This orientation toward purpose influences how you allocate your time and attention. You invest less energy into distractions and more into pursuits that feel meaningful. This orientation often leads to significant shifts in your material or professional path. You start to recognize opportunities that carry long-term potential rather than short-term gratification. Your decision-making becomes strategic rather than reactive. You may begin restructuring your finances, re-evaluating your career, or pursuing creative or entrepreneurial paths that reflect your expanding sense of possibility. These actions are not driven by desperation or haste. They emerge from alignment. Financially, a reduction in fear-based decision-making becomes noticeable. Where you once operated from scarcity, hesitating, hoarding, or restricting, you now approach resources with greater clarity and neutrality. You understand the importance of stability, but you also recognize that fear distorts judgment. This balanced mindset allows you to make wiser choices, whether conserving, investing, or expanding. Psychological research shows that individuals with a regulated emotional state make more effective financial decisions. What you are experiencing aligns with this principle. Creatively or intellectually, ideas may begin flowing more easily. This is a byproduct of mental decluttering. When emotional burdens lessen, cognitive bandwidth increases. You begin connecting concepts with greater fluidity, noticing patterns that previously escaped you. Innovation thrives in this state. You may find yourself reimagining old projects, initiating new ones, or approaching challenges with fresh insight. These combined shifts indicate that you are entering a phase where transformation becomes externally visible. It is no longer internal preparation, but external expression. The groundwork has been laid. Now the architecture begins to form. This stage represents the visible emergence of what has long been developing beneath the surface. Chosen one, as we come to the close of this sacred moment, take a breath and recognize what your spirit already knows. You are not waiting for breakthrough. You are standing in it. Heaven has already shifted in your favor, and the supernatural transfer assigned to your life is now in motion. This is your Kairos moment, the divine intersection where preparation meets promise, where obedience meets release, where faith meets fulfillment. Anointed One, may the clarity you receive today anchor you. May the peace of God settle in your chest. May the wisdom of the Spirit walk beside you in every step. And may every place of delay transform into acceleration as you align with what heaven has already declared over your name. I speak strength over your hands, courage over your decisions, and discernment over your path. May divine opportunities recognize you. May resources locate you. May favor rest upon you with a weight you cannot deny. What God has opened for you, no one can shut. What has been prepared for you, no one can take. Chosen one, walk out of this moment, knowing you are marked, guided, and backed by heaven's authority. Stay faithful, stay aligned, stay expectant. The evidence is already forming around you. If this word resonated in your spirit, you may share it, speak it, or seal it in the comments, not for algorithm, but as an act of agreement. Until we meet again, walk boldly, walk wisely, and walk as one who knows your breakthrough is here.